Federal prosecutors adding 2 more charges in their sports betting case against Puig.
What's going on, everybody? Today we are going to dive into the details of Yasiel Puig's career and personal life. It's one of my favorite and wildest stories of a professional baseball player. Every sport has its share of wild stories, career-defining moments, dramatic comebacks, legendary performances, but Puig's story is just insane. It's about cartels, cops, million-dollar extortion schemes, and FBI investigations, record-breaking performances, and career-ending scandals. But before we get into the content, this is a brand new YouTube channel, so leave a like and subscribe because we are passionate in bringing you the latest MLB analysis. Now that that's out of the way, let's get right into it. The year is 2009, and in Cienfuegos, Cuba, 19-year-old Yasiel Puig is already becoming a legend. In Cuba's Serie Nacional, the country's top baseball league, Puig isn't just competing against grown men, he's absolutely dominating them. By age 16, he was already playing for Cuba's national team. At 17, he was crushing balls with such force that locals still talk about a home run he hit that landed in a building's second-story window. And his final season stats in Cuba tell the story of a .330 batting average, a .430 on-base percentage, and the kind of raw power that makes scouts dream. These weren't just good numbers, they were exceptional for any player, let alone a teenager. But playing baseball in Cuba isn't just about statistics. Every game is played under the watchful eye of government officials. Every great performance comes with increased scrutiny. The better you play, the more closely they watch you, knowing that you might be the next star to embarrass the regime by defecting. For Puig, this scrutiny was suffocating. He had already tried to escape multiple times. His first attempt came in March 2011 when he tried to slip away in the dead of night, only to be caught and detained by Cuban authorities. 2 months later, he was back at it, this time making it as far as the open ocean before being intercepted. By August, he was trying again, but that time he couldn't even make it to the shore. January 2012 brought his 4th attempt. This one ended in the cops detaining him. Each failed attempt earned him more than just a suspension from baseball. It meant increased surveillance, more government overwatch, more restrictions on his movement. The Cuban government understood what Puig represented, a generational talent who could be worth millions in Major League Baseball. They weren't about to just let him go easily, but they did underestimate his determination, and being banned from baseball in Cuba only convinced Puig he had nothing left to lose. This is where Puig's story takes its first dark turn. In 2012, desperate to escape, he made contact with a Miami-based criminal organization. And these weren't just any criminals. They were connected to Los Zetas, one of Mexico's most violent drug cartels. The deal they offered seemed simple. They would finance and guarantee to get Puig out of Cuba to the United States in exchange for 20% of his future MLB earnings. What Puig didn't realize was that he was about to trade one form of imprisonment for another. The escape itself was like something out of a movie. Under the cover of darkness, Puig was taken by speedboat to the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. But instead of finally being free and on his way to MLB, he found himself held captive in a seedy Mexican motel. The room had no windows and armed guards stood watch 24/7. For weeks, the smugglers working for Los Zetas cartel locked him in a dingy motel room while they negotiated his price with rival gangs. What started as a straightforward smuggling operation had evolved into a complex web of competing interests. One cartel claimed they owned rights to Puig, having paid off his original smugglers. Another group said they had a deal with his handlers in Cuba. A third demanded payment for allowing safe passage through their territory. This is when the threat started to begin. If a deal wasn't reached soon, Puig might simply disappear. And this wasn't just any empty threat. The cartel has had a long history of dealing harshly with Cuban players who couldn't pay their debts. But finally, in June 2012, the Los Angeles Dodgers signed Puig to a 7-year, $42 million contract. Most scouts hadn't seen him play in over a year, but the Dodgers were either crazy or genius, and it turns out they were a little bit of both. The Dodgers were gambling tens of millions of dollars on his potential alone. For Puig, the contract should have meant freedom, a fresh start, the beginning of his dream coming true. Instead, it marked the beginning of a new nightmare. Almost immediately, the cartel decided that 20% wasn't enough. They wanted more. Even as Puig reported to the Dodgers minor league system, cartel members were getting increasingly more demanding. This set up a pattern that would define Puig's early career. Every baseball achievement would be shadowed overshadowed by threats and extortion attempts. While Puig was lighting up minor league pitching in Rancho Cucamonga, putting up a .354 batting average, he was also living a secret nightmare. Cartel associates began showing up at his hotel. Sometimes they would watch him from the parking lot and even come directly to his hotel room. Their demand, $12 million. Or they would start removing fingers. The Dodgers immediately ramped up security, but the threats kept coming. By spring training 2014, MLB security had to get involved after Cartel associates attempted to make contact, and the financial toll was staggering. Court records show that between 2013 and 2016, Puig's MLB earnings were being drained by demands from all sides. The initial smugglers claimed $1.3 million. Quote-unquote security consultants took another $800,000. Legal settlements cost him another $1.4 million. And those are just the payments we can track through official channels. Sources close to the situation estimate another $2.5 million disappeared into the shadows. The legal battles were just as draining. In 2013, Raul Pacheco demanded 20% of everything Puig would ever earn in baseball, referencing a contract signed under duress in that same Mexican motel room. By 2014, Capital Sports Funding Group was claiming $8.3 million, though their case eventually collapsed when investigators discovered forged documents. The most dangerous case came in 2015 when Corbacho Daudinot sued for $12 million, inadvertently exposing the deep connections between Cuban baseball trafficking and organized crime. Just imagine trying to develop as a baseball player under these circumstances. Puig was barely 21 years old, in a new country, learning a new language, adapting to professional baseball, all while dealing with death threats. The cartel also made sure he understood that they could reach his family back in Cuba at any time, adding even another layer of stress to an already insanely stressful situation. In a 2023 interview with Univision Deportes, Puig finally opened up about this period, saying, "Every time I threw to home plate, every time I tried to catch a fly ball, every time I came up to bat, I was thinking about my family, about the threats, about the money I owed. Baseball should have been my escape, but it became part of my prison." But back on the field, Puig got his big break on June 3rd, 2013. The Dodgers had called him up to the big leagues, and Puig stepped into the major league's batter's box for the first time, carrying not just the weight of expectations, but the invisible burden of ongoing cartel threats. And his first month in the majors wasn't just good, it was historically good. A .436 batting average, 7 home runs, a slugging percentage of .713. These weren't just rookie numbers. The only players in MLB history to match those stats in their first months were Joe DiMaggio and Roy Campanella, both of which are in the Hall of Fame today. The sports world quickly dubbed Puig the Wild Horse for his untamed, explosive style of play. What they didn't know was that same wildness was partially born from genuine fear and anxiety. Those headfirst slides, those reckless throws from the warning track, that seemingly endless energy, it all took on a different meaning when you understood what Puig was running from off the field. As Puig mania swept through baseball, the cartel's grip remained tight, and their reach became publicly visible in Miami when Gilberto Suarez, a businessman who helped arrange Puig's escape, was shot in broad daylight. Now, he did survive, but the message was clear. The cartel wasn't going away anytime soon. This shooting triggered a federal investigation that would reveal the full scope of what Puig had been dealing with. Now, during this same period, Puig was putting up numbers. Through his first 100 games, he hit .324 with 19 home runs, and his arm in right field became legendary. Runners completely stopped trying to take extra bases when the ball was hit his way. The advanced metrics were even more impressive. A 159 OPS plus and a 5.0 WAR in essentially half a season. But behind every highlight reel play, as we now know, there was a darker story unfolding. Those infamous late arrivals to the ballpark that frustrated Don Mattingly and Dodgers veterans, many weren't just about immaturity. Puig was constantly changing his routines, varying his arrival times, taking different routes to the stadium, all security measures learned from his time dodging authorities in Cuba and cartel members in Mexico. His relationship with teammates became increasingly strained at this time. Like, how do you explain to Clayton Kershaw why you keep switching hotels on road trips? How do you tell Adrian Gonzalez that you're late to batting practice because you're meeting with FBI agents about death threats? These are secrets that Puig wasn't sharing with his team and just caused more of a divide between him and his teammates. The 2024 season brought even new challenges. Puig was involved in a reckless driving incident in Tennessee where he was caught going 97 miles per hour in a 50-mile-per-hour zone. Now, this does take on new meaning when you think he was looking over his shoulder, maybe he thought the cartel or someone trying to extort him was following him, but still, this was a reckless incident that damaged his reputation. The bat flips, the emotional outbursts, the defiance of baseball's unwritten rules, these weren't just cultural differences. They were manifestations of a young man under enormous pressure, trying to maintain control of something, if anything, in his life. And still, the talent was undeniable. He made his first All-Star team in 2014, hitting .296 with 16 home runs and earning a reputation as one of the most exciting players in baseball. A 5.3 WAR player who could change games with his arm, his bat, or his legs. But by late 2014, the pressure really started to show. A heated dugout confrontation with teammate Zach Greinke made headlines. But the real story was what wasn't being reported. At that time, Puig was spending enormous amounts of money on security. He was struggling to meet the cartel's continued demands while maintaining his MLB lifestyle. Now, the Dodgers knew something was wrong, but they didn't fully understand the size of the problem. On top of this, the federal investigation into his smuggling case was ongoing, requiring constant meetings with law enforcement. Puig was essentially living three lives. He was an MLB star, a cartel target, and a federal informant. The fact that Hollywood hasn't made a movie on this yet is actually crazy. Like, it is a wild story. By this time in Puig's career, the impact of all this stress was really starting to show on the field. His aggressive approach at the plate became even more erratic. His explosive plays in the outfield sometimes crossed the line into recklessness. By 2015, Puig should have been entering his prime. The raw talent that had electrified baseball was still there, but the cracks were starting to show. His batting average dropped to .255, while a hamstring injury limited him to just 79 games. On the surface, it looked like a typical case of the league figuring out a young player who now had to make adjustments. But as we know now, the reality was far more complex. At this point, the cartel's influence had gone away slightly but didn't fully disappear. Even after the FBI made several arrests connected to his case, Puig couldn't escape the shadow of his past. He was spending upwards of $300,000 annually on private security. Every road trip required extensive security preparations. I mean, the paranoia that Yasiel Puig must have been going through was out of control. And all of this obviously bled into the Dodgers clubhouse, which caused even more drama for him. Veterans like Adrian Gonzalez and Justin Turner tried to mentor Puig, but how do you mentor someone dealing with threats you can't even imagine? It's not really possible. On top of this, Puig's behavior, the tardiness, the mood swings, the apparent lack of focus, was happening more frequently. During one particularly tense meeting in 2016, Dodgers management confronted Puig about his declining performance. What they didn't know was that he had just received fresh threats against his family that same morning. And his stats that season tell the story of distraction. A .263 batting average, just 11 home runs, and defensive metrics that showed his once spectacular play in right field was becoming inconsistent. For a moment though, things seemed to be getting better. The 2017 season brought a brief resurgence for Puig. He hit 28 home runs, played stellar defense, and helped the Dodgers reach the World Series. But off the field, the pressure had not gone away. The cartel's threats had evolved into more sophisticated extortion attempts. They were now targeting his endorsement earnings and demanding cuts of his commercial deals. This period also saw Puig make increasingly questionable decisions off the field that strained his relationship with the media. The same outlets that once celebrated Puig mania were now writing stories about a talented player throwing away his potential. By 2018, the Dodgers were growing tired of the drama. Puig's performance, while still solid, 23 home runs, a .267 average, wasn't enough to outweigh the headaches, the constant security concerns, the unpredictability, the strain on team chemistry. It was all becoming too much. By mid-2018, trade rumors were swirling, and the Dodgers were quietly reaching out to other teams, trying to gauge interest in their troubled star. But how do you trade a player whose off-field situation is so complex? How do you explain to another team's GM about the security requirements, the ongoing legal issues, the cartel connections? Like, who would want to trade for a player with so many off-the-field issues? While those trade rumors were swirling, Puig's play on the field became a perfect metaphor for his situation. He had moments of brilliant potential mixed with increasingly frequent lapses in judgment. He would make a spectacular catch one inning, then miss a cutoff man the next. He would hit a clutch home run and then get thrown out trying to stretch a single into a double. And by December 2018, the Dodgers finally pulled the trigger, trading Puig to the Cincinnati Reds. Now, on paper, it looked like a fresh start. Cincinnati's smaller market meant less media scrutiny, and great American ballparks' hitter-friendly dimensions seemed perfect for Puig's power. Initially, it seemed to work. Puig hit 22 home runs in 100 games with the Reds and driving in 61 runs. The energy that had made him famous in LA was still there, but it felt different, more focused, less erratic. But midway through the 2019 season, Puig was traded again, this time to Cleveland. The Indians were in a playoff race and needed his bat. There, we saw another version of Puig, more mature, more selective at the plate. His walk rate improved, he was making more consistent contact. Between Cincinnati and Cleveland, he finished 2019 with solid numbers, a .269 average, 24 home runs, and 84 RBIs. But unfortunately for Puig, off the field, things would continue to get worse. Sexual assault allegations began to surface. A woman was claiming Puig had assaulted her at a Lakers game back in 2018 during his time with the Dodgers. Now, Puig did deny the allegations, but the damage to his reputation was already beginning. And as the 2020 season approached, Puig, a free agent, seemed positioned for another chance. He had agreed to sign with the Atlanta Braves for the COVID-shortened season, only to have that deal nullified by a positive COVID test. This wasn't just bad timing, it was the end for his career. While other players would return from COVID protocols, Puig remained unsigned. Puig wouldn't get another contract from an MLB team, as teams began receiving troubling reports about Puig's off-field activities. The sexual assault allegations were now also in the open. There were whispers about gambling too, and the cartel connections, while mostly in the past, still made teams nervous. So with MLB's doors closing, Puig took his talents to Mexico, signing with El Aguila de Veracruz, and the numbers were good, a .312 average and 10 home runs in 62 games. But it just wasn't the same Puig who had electrified MLB. The explosive speed was gone, the cannon arm was less accurate. While he was still capable of amazing plays, they came less frequently. Now, if Puig had any hopes of re-signing with an MLB team, all those hopes were completely shattered in April of 2023, when Puig agreed to plead guilty to lying to federal investigators about illegal sports betting. The investigation revealed hundreds of bets placed through an illegal gambling operation. Now, while none of the bets were on baseball, the mere association with gambling was toxic for his career. And Puig had not only placed illegal bets, but had also lied to federal investigators about it. For a player already carrying the baggage of cartel connections and sexual assault allegations, this was the final straw. Now, today, at age 34, Yasiel Puig exists in a kind of baseball limbo. The raw physical tools that made him the wild horse are still there. He can still hit for power, he can still run, still throw, but the list of controversies, the cartel connections, the sexual assault allegations, the gambling scandal have just made him unemployable to Major League Baseball teams. The irony is that Puig's style of play, once considered controversial, has now become mainstream in the league. The bat flips he was criticized for are now featured in MLB marketing. The emotional displays that earned him criticism are now celebrated in younger players. Baseball basically evolved to embrace the very things that made Puig polarizing. And when we look purely at the numbers, Puig's career tells a story of unfulfilled potential. Over 7 MLB seasons, he accumulated a .277 career batting average, 132 home runs, and 79 stolen bases, as well as an 18.3 WAR, 1 All-Star appearance, and 2 World Series appearances. The question of what could have been is a big one. Could Puig have achieved Hall of Fame stats if it wasn't for all the controversies that affected his play and ultimately ended his career? Based on his early years, it's easy to make a case for it. But at the end of the day, Puig's story has had a lasting impact on MLB as a whole and how they handle Cuban defectors and international signings in general. His experience highlighted the dark underbelly of players smuggling and the ongoing influence of criminal organizations in the Cuban baseball pipeline. Teams now conduct more thorough background investigations and provide more support for Cuban players. The trauma of defection, the pressure of cartel threats, the cultural adjustment, Puig's story forced baseball to confront all of these issues. His story highlighted the complex challenges faced by players who must navigate not just a new league, but a new country, language, and culture, all while carrying the weight of threats and obligations from their past. Now, I'm curious, what do you guys think? Was the behavior that Puig showed on the field disrespectful to the game, or was it a byproduct of the level of pressure he was under? Let me know in the comments what you think about Puig's legacy. Could better support systems have changed his trajectory? If it wasn't for all his off-the-field trouble, could he have achieved a Hall of Fame type career? And don't forget to like and subscribe for more baseball analysis. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.